what does like the toxic masculine look like to you? Because there is so many definitions being thrown
Oh yeah.
around. So, and what is like this, but also sometimes toxic feminine, which is something we might not talk so much about. Like we talk a lot about toxic masculine, but there's also the toxic feminine. Like what
Oh
do
yeah.
those two represent to you versus what is like the divine masculine, divine feminine in your perspective, specifically even more when it's in business?
Yeah, so the divine, I'll start with the toxic. So the toxic masculine, and whether it's man or woman that's doing this, right, is that bottom dollar, I don't care. You meet this quota or you're out. They don't want to hear excuses. I mean, when your kid has a when your kid's sick and you can't get to work, it's an excuse to somebody who's in a toxic kind of that toxic energy. They're also often quite aggressive and domineering. And so in a working environment, it can come across, I mean, literally, I've had people scream at me, right? Because I did something that was out of alignment with what they thought I should do. In the opposite extreme of that, the toxic feminine, I've had the toxic feminine where there's always an excuse, they're always whining. And when I see somebody in leadership, right? So I've had women that are in that toxic masculine energy. Okay, so I just want to be clear. I'm not saying men only. I've had women bosses that were in that toxic masculine, but I've also worked for women that were in the toxic feminine, where they're very manipulative, they're very condescending, they're very jealous. I had a boss, she's really short, very petite, I'm very tall. And the big boss came and he looked to me as the boss, the manager of that area. And she absolutely flipped out, even though, she was clearly the boss, not me, because of my stature, right? And so that that became this competition in a different manner. Now she had to completely tear me down to just be very vicious. She became very vicious and nasty, that toxic feminine, right? So when you see that you're in that, you can shift into the divine, right? And the divine masculine is protective energy. It's supportive energy. You think of the man that wants to support and lift up the women, like my boss, right? There's also this wonderful, beautiful assertiveness as opposed to aggressiveness, right? And a woman who's in her divine feminine has really solid boundaries and lots of compassion, right? So men and women can be in either any of those four categories. And usually if you're in the masculine, toxic masculine, you also carry the toxic feminine energy somewhere. If you're
Mhm.
in the divine masculine, you also have your divine feminine. So, that
They
they
kind of
mix
go hand
together.
in hand, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's such an
Absolutely.
interesting perspective and definition. I don't think I ever heard that specific way of explaining this, and I see how this can play into the work dynamics and
Oh,
leadership
yes.
dynamics. That's very interesting.